Hello there, friends. If you are watching this, it probably means that you have been a participant in the self image project and you might even have finished it. Um, when I created the self image project, my idea was to create a tool that would basically be a tool for self awareness. And the idea behind self awareness is basically that what we are not aware of, we cannot do anything about. However, when we become aware of things, that's when we can start to actually look into it and deal with it. And that's the whole idea of the image that we have of ourselves, that we're not actually really aware of, and therefore we're a slave to it, if you will. Now, I wanted to build up that online course in three parts because it was necessary to start with the awareness, as in bringing attention to how the mind functions, why you become that way that you are today. And then the second part being, and this is the results that you have. And so in that part, I gave you a few of the typical things that constitutes the self-image and that limits us a lot with the limiting beliefs, and also with some exercises, of course, in order to kind of practice that and to see a little bit of it. And then in the third part, the idea was that once we have this awareness, we can start by creating a routine for ourselves, a routine which is the idea of recondition and, well, actually uncondition and then recondition, in order to create new habits, for instance. And so once that part was done on the self-image course, um, me myself, I had a desire, and I've even had in the interactions with some of the participants, a desire to dive deeper into certain things. And more specifically, what I found very interesting since a very long time is the idea of, and I'm going to use this word only once, I think, because otherwise I'm going to try to find another one, but addictions. The reason I don't really like to use that word is, of course, that there's got a connotation to it. And we can often feel guilt and shame around the idea of addictions, and it's something negative and something that we should stop with, etc., etc. And hopefully, during the new course, you will begin to see that that is all very unnecessary because actually we're made to be addicted to things, and then also that it's counterproductive because it's actually just going to reinforce, unfortunately, the habit that we want to get rid of. But the reason that I wanted to dive deeper into this idea of addictions is also because from a yogic perspective, I started looking into the idea of um, basically all our actions, and that when we look at the things we do, a lot of them are just habits that we keep repeating. And because we have this conditioned mind, they're very often also habits that are associated with things. So it can be associated with geographical context or place, but also a context on emotional situation that we're in. And then there's these habits that we just used to do at this place or at this point in time. And so we do them there. And we're doing it not very consciously, but more subconsciously. And therefore, we're not really controlling them. And we're not controlling them because, of course, we're not aware of them. And since we're not aware of them, well, we can't actually do anything about them. And so, as I started to look into why do we do things like that, it also gave me the possibility to just have this yogic view on anything that we do in life, we do for a reason. And every movement, so life in itself is movement. It's actually impossible to not move as life goes on. From 1 second to the next, we're different. From one meal to the next, we're different. And so everything that we do, life is movement. And movement always towards freedom, towards liberation. Now, let me explain that one. What I mean by that is that every action that I take is an action that I take because I believe that it will free me in some way from something. So naturally, I will eat in order to liberate myself, free myself from the agony, the suffering, the uncomfortable feeling of hunger. The same way with drinking something. I will put on a sweater to free myself from the uncomfortable sensation of being cold. I will seek company from others, for instance, to free myself from an uncomfortable tension that makes me feel lonely. So everything that I do as a way to free myself. I do it because somewhere inside of me, there's a conviction that it will make me feel better. Now, that's exactly what addiction is. Addiction is a coping mechanism. And a coping mechanism is something that we develop as a strategy. So we do it consciously, okay? It's a strategy that we develop so we know that we're doing it. It's not as if we're not aware of ourselves doing it. However, the context around it we might not be so very well aware of. And this is the reason, of course, that most of the time when we try to stop an addiction, we fail. Because we're actually not looking at it from the right perspective. There are a lot of addictions, of course, most of the ones that you think about, that we would see as unhealthy or not serving us, or doing them, well, basically just seems like self sabotage. So, how come there is a feeling inside of us that we're moving towards feeling better by doing them? Because we haven't found the root of why we do them. So, basically, what we're going to work on in the following course, which is going to be much more of an interactive work in group, so that we feel as well the company and the strength of not being alone in something and to be able to share with others. Have you noticed yourself how we relax as soon as we share something with someone who understands us, and then we feel that we belong? All of a sudden, we are more relaxed, which is why also we can deal with things that are triggered by stress, for instance, more easily. Now, that's key when it comes to the addiction. So, as I mentioned, we want to free ourselves from something. So, there's a trigger actually. This is how the addiction happens. There's a trigger, which means that there's something from the outside of me that puts me in a state that has a certain tension of discomfort. Then I will take on a behavior in order to free myself from that sensation. I will liberate myself from the discomfort, from the suffering. And then the reward is that all of a sudden I feel a little bit better. And this is what actually creates the strong pattern of going back into it again. It's the reward sensation that happens once we've done the behavior, which is why, of course, we keep eating. This is our survival brain. You know this by now, that comes in and tells us, oh, remember this. When you did that, it made you feel better. And so remember what you did and where you did it. Basically, from a very long time ago, you would find food and you felt rewarded because you felt good. So your reptilian brain would tell you to register where you got that food from, what it was, so that you would remember to do it again. Now, here's the reason that trying to stop an addiction usually doesn't work. You know it already a little bit, and we're going to dive deeper into it. We have one part of our brain. I've been talking about basically the conscious mind and the subconscious mind in the self-image project, and it's exactly that. But let's just call them the old and the new brain instead, just for the idea of the survival part of ourselves. So the new brain, as you know, has willpower inside of it. It has planning ahead and worrying about things and creativity and things like that. And we think a lot with the new brain. But then the old brain, the survival brain, is then what takes it all in, records it, creates the automatic modes so that the new brain doesn't have to remember it. Remember that with the subconscious part of us, which is more or less like the body in itself, actually registering everything so that we can easily access it again, even though the conscious mind or the new brain or the actual prefrontal cortex can be active doing other things. Now, as you know, when we with our willpower decide to stop the addiction, it doesn't really work because actually willpower isn't strong enough because the subconscious mind is stronger. The reason for this is that the new brain or the prefrontal cortex um, has willpower inside of it, all right? But more than that, when there is a stressful situation happening, we switch on our survival mode. I've told you this before when we were working on different things, and you saw it in the exercises of the self image project, that when there's a trigger coming from the outside of fear, so when there's a stressful situation basically, our subconscious mind would take over because it was the way to quickly switch on the mode that you don't have to remember, but that's always stored. But what it also means is that when we are stressed, the active mind just shuts off. This is the reason, of course, that we don't remember things that we usually remember, or that all of a sudden we can't find our words, because actually the very developed human part of ourselves, let's say, just stops working. And then the old part of ourselves, or the subconscious mind, or the reptilian brain takes over and just says, okay, this is what we need to do. But here's the thing: if willpower is the only thing really that we use to fight the addiction, and then the stressful situation happens, the trigger to actually take on the addiction, well, the willpower stops working. And this is the reason that you promised yourself you wouldn't do it again, and then you do it anyway. As soon as you feel a little bit triggered in your stress, you will still reach for that cookie. So the trigger happens, old brain comes back in, we do the behavior, and then we feel the reward. And what happens, unfortunately, as the reward comes in, we calm ourselves down again. And then the conscious mind becomes active again, and that's when the guilt and the shame and all of that comes back in. I did it again. And unfortunately, then we will associate that with a negative part of ourselves, which means that we will also then reinforce the stress, the trigger by that, which will mean that then we'll probably reach for another cookie again. And there we go. All right, so for those of you who find that this sounds interesting, and knowing that all of this is far beyond, of course, the typical addictions that we think about. It is our eating behaviors. It's how we deal, of course, with social media, how it is in the dating world, but how it is in the relationships as well, not only in the dating world, how we are with our kids and with our parents. Anything that can create a stressful situation inside of you, anything that will trigger your fear response. So you can see yourself, there's a lot of reasons that we will take on behaviors that we don't really wish we would have in that situation, but that's actually an unconscious pattern of behavior that is rooted inside of us and that we need to bring to the surface in order to start to deal with. And I will take you through different kinds of methods and explain even further in the new course. And if you're interested in diving deeper into that, then you should get in contact. Just simply email me and you're part of the group already. I'm going to create a Facebook group for the participants of the self-image project, and those of you who then wish to take it deeper, you will just simply accept the invitation. All right. Thank you, and have a lovely day wherever you are.